We've got a brand new Magic set, and this time it's Magic IP. Tarkir Dragonstorm is here for Vintage. Welcome back, Vintage gamers, to a new set review for Vintage Tarkir Dragonstorm. Not the most impactful set so far, but you never know, we might miss very important cards. I didn't even include stock up on my set review for the last set, so this time will be a little bit more thorough and go through some of those uncommons. Starting with Auroral Procession. This is a blue-green instant regrowth. There was a time where regrowth was too good for Vintage. That is not this time anymore. Sometimes the single regrowth makes it into decks like Oath of Druids, but for the most part, this type of effect is no longer significantly powerful. However, we all know adding blue to a card is very good and very important, and actually very helpful for most of these Oath of Druids decks. These decks want to be hitting a very high blue count for Force of Will, because these decks tend to be a little bit more on the controlling side. Not the newest show and tell versions as much, but like previous decks of the past have wanted one regrowth, and maybe this card sneaks its way into some Oath of Druids decks. Being able to pitch to Vigor, Force of Negation, and Force of Will is a very big upside, and being an instant allows you to play this at instant speed, holding open things like Flusterstorm, Spell Pierce, Mystical Dispute. It's an upgrade for sure. Obviously, the mana cost is more prohibitive, and in these show and tell decks, they are more likely to have the colorless mana cost of 1+X. However, in a more controlling Oath deck, blue-green should not be a huge issue. We also have Ralshasa's Bargain. This card is actually being talked about on the Discord at least, because it is very similar to stock up. We're looking at one less card, and we're getting an upgrade where the cards you don't choose go near your graveyard. Going to your graveyard is definitely better than going to the bottom of your library, but one less card is a lot less cards. Well, the other thing here is this is an instant, so we get a very nice upside against stock up, where we are casting this on our opponent's turn, again holding open things like removal or counter magic. That being said, the mana cost is prohibitive, and if you are not playing exactly Bug, it might be too much. If you have to pay 4 mana for this card every time, it's probably not good enough for Vintage. If you're playing black, blue, 2, I don't think this kind of effect is what you want. At that point, maybe you're looking at things like PO and Gifts Ungiven and those kind of things. That being said, if you're casting this for black, green, blue, that's pretty interesting. You might be getting some good value off of a thing like that. It's worth noting that this is technically a 6 total mana cost card. It would trigger Up the Beanstalk if there was an Up the Beanstalk deck. Green bug style decks have been the ones that have been experimenting with Up the Beanstalk in the past. So there is some chance that you can put together some kind of controlling, maybe a Lurrus controlling Beanstalk deck. Up the Beanstalk in Vintage triggers off of some very powerful spells like Force of Will, Misdirection, Gush, Delve spells. So, there's a lot of room inside of maybe a Lurrus bug deck to start putting together some kind of control deck that plays at instant speed. Maybe it's worth talking about. I'm not sure. I think this card is very interesting. And the fact that Stock Up is putting these kind of cards into a conversation about should we be thinking about this in Vintage is very, very cool. This is a Mox, so it has to be good, right? I mean, Moxes are so expensive. They're so powerful. Even my dad sent me a text message showing me the X out of 500 Mox version of this. So, people outside of Magic know a Mox is a Mox, but this is, of course, a new Mox. And a new Mox, they've learned how to fix them. And by fix them, I mean most of the time make them not very good. A Mox is very strong when it is being used to cast things ahead of curve. So even some of the more fixed Moxes like Chrome Mox, Mox Diamond, Mox Opal, these are still helping you cast things ahead of curve. And the Moxes that don't see play, Tantalus and Amber, have a requirement that you do something first before they make mana, in which case they stop being extremely strong. That being said, if you found a very strong 1-mana dragon, maybe this card starts to be, in a conversation. We used to say that about Mox Amber as well. Like, if you get enough, good 1-mana legendaries, maybe Mox Amber is good. And that's never actually been the case. And we hit some good 1-mana Mox legendaries for Mox Amber. Ragavan existed. As much as I think Ragavan is a bad card and not very playable in Vintage, it is certainly a card that's very powerful over the the spectrum of Magic the Gathering cards. So I don't expect any Mox Jaspers to be played in winning Vintage decks. However, there are, sometimes some good Sprite Dragon decks. Sprite Dragon, a card not seeing much play anymore, but was a focal point in Vintage at one point in time. So maybe someone gets together with Mox Jasper and Sprite Dragon and puts together a very interesting looking blue-red list. Who knows? Mistride Village. That is a card that is being talked about a lot in a lot of different formats. And I think the card in general is being overrated. It does have a high cost to make your next spell uncounterable. Blue and it is it's basically a blue, make my next spell uncounterable. That's a lot of mana. And it's going to be hard to have that much extra mana and still cast a spell that you want to resolve super badly. The fact that this is coming into play tapped, unless you have a mountain or a forest, very much limits you to rug decks, blue-green decks, and blue-red decks. I don't think... I mean, you could maybe get away with it in like a bug color deck, but it's starting to get a little dicey once you get there. I believe the best home for this kind of card is going to be in an Oath of Druids or a Show and Tell style deck. I actually feel like this card fits right at home in maybe a blue-green Show and Tell deck in Legacy. But in Vintage, blue, using blue to make your spell uncounterable is a lot. And that's not on curve with what the current Show and Tell and Oath decks want to be doing. They want to be casting their spells on turn 1, turn 2, and turn 3. And this, it's gonna have to be turn 2 is your high roll. Like maybe you have a Lotus and you play your Lotus and then you play this and then you make your Show and Tell uncounterable. Maybe that's like the high roll situation. But a lot of times this isn't gonna be even doing anything on turn 3 unless you have a very heavy Mox in start. So, and you really are gonna be wanting your spell that you're making uncounterable to win the game. And you have to do it ahead of time before you cast your spell. So yeah, I don't think this card is as good as most people say it's going to be. People have been freaking out about this. It's not as good as something like Cavern of Souls, but obviously it makes blue mana, so that's very important here. I would not be surprised if you see this in Oath, but outside of Oath, I'm not sure what decks would want this. Again, if there's a Show and Tell deck that's not Oath, it might want this as well. Something I'm thinking about recently is this Omnitel. I'll probably do a bunch of brewing this week when this airs, and then when I'm out of the box bootcamp with Omnitel. That's the big reason I haven't been doing a ton of Vintage content right now, is I've been working on competing in the TFT event. So yeah, Mistride Village, it's a powerful effect, but is the cost worth it? That's the question you're going to have to answer. Voice of Victory. Now, this is a card that I'm mostly excited about, it seems. It seems it's more of a me thing, but I do look at other Eternal formats when thinking about how to approach Vintage. Some of the formats I look at the most are Legacy and CEDH. I find that CEDH had, at least the previous metagame where I tried it out, had a very similar gameplay style to Vintage. And obviously, it's very different because of the multiplayer aspect, and this kind of effect scales very well with multiple players. However, it's very frequent that those decks will even play things like Silence and to perform their game-winning combo. And this is not exactly a new kind of card because Grand Abolisher has existed in the past. It's a very similar effect to this, but it costs white. But this is a human. It has some attacking potential with this Mobilize 2. And I was thinking maybe there could be some combo Lurrus decks that would want a card like this. You put your opponent in a very hard spot if you lead turn 1 on Moxen plus this. If they don't have a removal spell and they have a Force of Will, well, their Force of Will is not going to be turned on. You know, like if this gets to sit and play and you're threatening a combo on turn 2, they might have to counter this in a very similar way to Vexing Bauble. However, this is, you know, a creature, same colors as Lurrus, could be played off of Cavern. Something you could think about is maybe like, I don't know, a Hermit Druid deck. You can use utilizing Cavern. Not sure. That doesn't sound particularly good in my head, but I think that this is an interesting card. I believe this is a card that Brian Kelly would play. If Brian Kelly was playing Vintage right now, I think he would be playing a Lurrus Breach deck, Brian Kelly style. And I think this card you would see this card as a one of in his Breach combo deck. It's very interesting to me, and a card that I want people to be on the look for, and I'm going to do a bunch of brewing with just to prove and see if it fits. I wouldn't say misevaluated, but maybe undersold Vexing Bauble. And this does do part of what Vexing Bauble does while also being an attacking creature. So we'll have to keep an eye on Voice of Victory. Here is the big one. The one that everyone is talking about. The most likely card to have a significant impact on Vintage is Clarion Conqueror, a 3-mana dragon that is a flying 3/3 and also turn off the abilities of artifacts, creatures, and planeswalkers. So this is a super null rod. The main thing here is going to be turning off artifacts, of course. Null rod effect is very important, but turning off creatures and planeswalkers is not nothing. Like I said, Hermit Druid exists, Deathrite Shaman exists, and then of course there are still some planeswalkers running around. The biggest thing is that this is a flying 3/3 null rod for 3, and that's a good rate. That is a thing that you want to be doing. But it comes with a catch, and this is the catch that I'm going to tell you about, because it's not, in my mind, as simple as throw 4 of these in Mono White Initiative and it's going to automatically work. Because it's a dragon, it's not an easy Cavern of Souls name, and because your Mono White Initiative deck so heavily utilizes mana, especially utilizes mana to make white mana, I'm envisioning there being problems with playing this in Mono White Initiative as is. I can think you might, like, if you Cavern this out on turn 1, you might just never cast another creature spell the whole game. Maybe that's enough. Like against Jewel, that might just be enough. But like against other decks, maybe it just slows you down too much. I'm worried that this card will hurt yourself too much in Mono White Initiative. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't play this card in Mono White Initiative. I'm saying that you might want to reconfigure your deck or even your play patterns when you play this card in the deck. Like maybe you are not looking to slam this on turn 1 or 2. Maybe this is your 3rd spell. Maybe you're trying to get that Archon in there, then you're trying to get an initiative creature, and then you close the game out with this. Maybe that's the play. Or just like being cognizant that there's a significant downside to turning off your own things. And I think Mono White players know that because they've been boarding in null rods since the beginning of time. So, this card's going to be good, and this card is going to see play. Whether or not it hurt, the questions are, how much does it hurt Mono White Initiative to be playing this in their deck? And how much can they mitigate that while still keeping power level? Can they change up their deck to make it a little more easy to cast more white spells after? Those are the things that I'm going to be really interested in watching this card, because it's not a card that I'm going to be playing with very much. I can't imagine, unless it's so good that Mono White Initiative shoots back up into the middle of the metagame, and that's, you know, the deck to beat. But even then, I'm usually on the side of someone trying to beat the Mono White deck rather than being the person playing the Mono White deck, especially because I'm not super interested in playing the Mono White Mirror. That being said, it's kind of nice. Mono White Initiative is a deck that is on a significant downturn and has been for over a year. The deck is dwindling away in popularity and win rate, and it has some, you know, very staunch supporters in the community. So giving a big buff to Mono White Initiative, putting it back into the focus, I think that'd be a nice little shakeup for Vintage. Taigam, Master Opportunist. This is a cool card. I don't know if this card will be good. It probably won't be good, but I'm going to try because this card is sweet. This card is a lurissable 2-mana blue card. Whenever you cast the second spell each turn, copy that spell, exile that spell with 4 time counters on it, and it gains suspend. So basically, the second spell you cast each turn, you're going to get a copy of it, and then 4 turns later, you're going to get that spell again. So obviously, the big thing you would think about is something like Ancestral Recall, right? You're going to get your Ancestral Recall now, and you're going to get another Ancestral Recall in 4 turns. You're going to lock that game up for sure. The problem here is 4 turns is a lot. That's number one problem. 4 turns is a ton of turns. Getting to 4 turns is going to be hard. And the second problem is this kind of has a similar issue to Ledger Shredder. I don't know if anyone remembers me playing a lot of Ledger Shredder in Vintage. And one of the problems is your play pattern a lot of times wants to go turn 1 Island Mox Ledger Shredder or turn 1 Island Mox Taigam. And you just don't get to trigger your card on the first turn in Vintage, which is it's not a problem as much as it's a mental pain. You play it and you're like, damn, I'm not getting value this turn. This stinks. And maybe that's not a big deal, but maybe it is a big deal. You know, maybe not getting your first trigger means you don't ever get a trigger off this. For what it's worth, this is each turn. So if you're playing some kind of draw spells on your opponent's turn, 2 spells a turn, if you like force a spell and then play a draw spell, you can do this. That'd be pretty cool. Say you force their spell and then you play an ancestral, copy it, get another ancestral. Maybe that's pretty sweet. For the most part, people are not playing a ton of instants to go with their Flusterstorms, but you know, it does happen. You could maybe play a Spell Pierce on their thing and then Flusterstorm one of their not Flusterstorm, Fatal Push one of their creatures. That would be a pretty solid play, getting another Fatal Push. Yeah, I don't know. This is a powerful effect is the reason it's here. It's a powerful effect. It's in blue. It's lurissable. It's not bowmasterable. So it's a card that should be experimented with. My gut instinct is that card is just not there for Vintage. 4 turns seems like too many turns. But I'm going to try. And that is it. Those are our cards so far in Tarkir Dragonstorm. Let me know if I missed one, especially if it's as good as stock up. I don't want to miss any more stock ups when I'm reviewing sets. You know, there are a lot of Magic cards these days, and sometimes an uncommon slips through the cracks. What do you think about Tarkir Dragonstorm? Are you going to play any of its cards in Vintage? Let me know in the comments as we return to gameplay videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'll see you then.